it is called Global Trends, Local Faces. And so the idea here is to bring together two individuals from a given industry, right? So a similar industry, in this case, food and beverage. You might even say yeast in this case. But to just discuss some of the trends that we're seeing. I'd love to discuss some of the trends that we've seen, in the last year or so, but then also the future of that industry, right? So where is it going? Where will we see things heading? And things like that. So that's kind of the goal of the session overall. I'm really, really thrilled about tonight's because I enjoy bread and beer. So when I heard who was going to be joining me, did we lose Jeff? Oh, there he is. When I heard who was going to be joining me, I was thrilled. And I think, like I said, the Venn diagram between the two of them is pretty remarkable. So I'd like to start with just some introductions. I know you two know each other, but just for the, kind of the crowd here, I would love to hear, your guys' name, the company that you work for, the role at that company, and maybe how long you've been doing that, or how long you've been with either in your current role or also within the industry. Because I think for both of you, there's some fascinating history on that side of like how long you guys have been in this industry. So really, we can start with either of you if you guys just want to trade off.
Jeff, you want to go? You lead us off here, pal.
Okay, I will. Thank you, Rick. Yeah, thanks for showing that spot. It's a great spot. Yeah, it's awesome. That was my first television spot, and I had such a great time working with you guys on that. Great clients make great spots, and you have to have them for sure. You got to buy good creative. So it still holds up. I'm like, drink that beer. My name is Jeff Stevens. I'm the founder of Wellbeing Brewing. I was in the creative ad world for a long time and got the market how to cups to truck worked on Anheuser-Busch products, and so really understood beer. But I was a lifelong non-drinker, and so I also was out a lot with clients and realized that people who don't drink alcohol are often forgotten, or there just weren't a lot of choices, or you were always this underserved market, and you were you're not drinking, so there might be something wrong with you. So there was just a lot of stigma that went along with that. And I think, as we all have seen, this non-alcoholic market has started to grow. About 2017, it just started to sort of slowly take off. And it was something that the second I thought about doing a non-alcoholic craft beer, I immediately just thought this was something I could figure out. So anyway, figured out how to brew it. We make it here in St. Louis, and we've been growing ever since. I went through the CIC, a bunch of the programming there, and have been close to that, and have gotten a lot of help from the people from Venture Cafe and all the stuff, Phyllis, and all the things that people do there. So I got a lot of help from this community, a lot of help from St. Louis to get this thing going. So it's great to be here.
And I'll say, my history and how my path came to AB Mauri. So AB Mauri is a baking technology company. So we make Fleishman's yeast. That's what most people would know us as. We're the B2B arm. So we sell into large industrial and craft bakers. My name is Rick Oleshak. I've been there 7 years. I came from Anheuser-Busch, as we talked about, was there for 13. Had a really interesting career even before that. I came from NASCAR. So I was in auto racing, not as a driver, but on the PR side. So worked a lot with Dale Jr. before he even stepped into the Budweiser car. So I knew him pretty well. And then prior to that, I was with the Orlando Magic. So I had more of a sports marketing background, moved into beer, spent a lot of time there, spent a lot of time on key brands like Michelob Ultra and Stella Artois, and even O'Doul's, which Jeff and I, we worked with, back in the agency day on that brand. So hope maybe that gave you a little bit of insight and a little inspiration to how do you generate some excitement for this area. But our business too, what's interesting about AB Mauri is we're not just baking technology. We're part of a larger company, and maybe most people don't know that. And AB for AB Mauri has nothing to do with Anheuser-Busch. Right. It means Associated British. It's part of Associated British Foods, which is almost like a Procter and Gamble type company, $20 billion in revenue each year, everything from British Sugar to Twinings Tea to Mazola to Ovaltine. So a lot of products you've heard of, mostly ingredients, mostly grocery, and actually even a little bit of a retail clothing business. Who's ever been to an H&M? Well, we have a competitive company called Primark that's very big in Europe. There are some stores already in the Northeast United States. They're working on one for Chicago as well. But so really an interesting company, and baking is just one of those many things that we do well. So happy that we've called Cortex home, 4240 Homes, since 2015. We've already expanded once in 2019. We've got about 33,000 square feet. We've got one of the largest lab spaces in the area for baking. It's called the Baking Hub. So it's where we do a lot of our technical evaluations, testing. If we get a free donut here or there, or maybe a loaf of bread to take home, that's a good day. We have a fermentation lab and a learning experience hub, which a lot of people haven't seen because of COVID. But can't wait to hopefully see a lot of you in person when things get active. So I appreciate you having us on, Joe.
Absolutely. I myself have been doing, I've created my own experimental lab at home for both bread baking and beer drinking this past year. Really gotten a lot of work done in both of those areas. So yeah, no, I think, yeah, no, I'm like I said, I'm thrilled to have you guys both on here. And I think it's a fascinating insight. And in this case, I want to talk about some of the trends that you guys are seeing within your given respective industries. And it feels like that can't help but relate to maybe the world as we see it today. And so like, for instance, I'm curious if, because it almost became a meme when things, last March, things, first started to lock down of like, I'm going to learn bread baking, right? That just, everyone started to say it, right? Similarly, some people may have overdone it this year. Let's be completely honest, right? And so as they're looking for, other options, I know that Wellbeing, you see it more and more in stores, and you see more and more of a selection, and related to, of course, the craft beer, just absolute craze, and of course the craft beer industry in St. Louis is well known and well established. And so anyway, I'm just like I said, this is an open discussion, and we'll certainly dive in on certain things. But I'm curious if you guys had some general overview of some trends that you guys are experiencing in your industry. And again, we can just trade back and forth. But yeah.
Okay. I would say, when the pandemic hit, it was interesting. The alcohol industry took off again, but the at-home delivery industry took off again, really took off. And we had been doing e-commerce for a while, but because we don't have alcohol, you can deliver it to consumers, and that's a big deal. So for us, I think the at-home delivery trend is a thing that is here to stay in some form. And I think people enjoy getting stuff delivered. They did before the pandemic. I just think habitually speaking, we'll see that as a trend in the beverage business. But I think what we're really seeing now, and Rick, I'm sure you would relate to this, is the world's about to open up. Everyone's kind of preparing for that. And we ran into a distributor today who said they went from selling 3 kegs a week to 100 kegs a week last week ordered. And you can just tell like, oh, the new trend, I think, is going to be the world's going to open back up again. And that's exciting. For our industry, what I think the health and wellness trend is huge. It has driven our business. People want healthier versions of products they already buy. So that's a big one. We keep that in mind a lot. For what I think Wellbeing could become is I'd love to do a physical space and a real interesting non-alcoholic brewery, and just play with that and see where that could take us and what that looks like. And so we're interested in that. And then I also think there's a real trend, functional drinks, really healthy functional drinks. I think obviously CBD, THC, there's a huge driver in that. There's a lot of, we do an electrolyte beer. We're going to do an immunity beer. We're going to do this kind of beer. And I think when you take the alcohol out and start to think about the healthy things you can put back in beer, it's exciting, because I think beer is a really nice drink to put healthy ingredients in. So those are sort of the trends we're looking at as far as how we can grow and where we can be innovative.
Yeah, kind of tagging on to that one too, Jeff. I mean, it's been almost a year. It was March 17th of 2020 when we were in the office and they said everybody needs to go home. And we're like, what? We'll be back in a month or two, no big deal. And here it is a year later. So a lot of things have changed. But, rewind back a year, March 2020, in the yeast business for at-home bakers went up 600%. In the month of April of 2020, it was up 400%. And since then, it's been, 150 to 200. We've got our our baker's yeast plant in Montreal that's been going 7 days a week since the pandemic hit. And they've done an excellent job getting product out. But you saw what everybody was doing, right? You saw the shots on social media, people baking at home. What else am I going to do at home, right? I can learn a new craft. I can have some fun with my family, because guess what? They're probably, homeschooling, right? They're virtual learning instead of being in a classroom. So there are a lot of things going on, and actually we are one of the beneficiaries of that. Now you talk about what are some of the trends or some of the things that we keep an eye on. It's very similar to what's going on in beer, but I'll say there's always that balance, right? Especially right now. You see it always around the click of the calendar into the new year, right? People are thinking about, how do I stay healthy? Maybe I indulge a little bit, but those two themes, right? Being healthy and being indulgent are there, and they're going to stay. So, in our world, baking world, it's all about cleaner label. Sustainability is another big one, because people want to know the stories, but they want to know the story of your company and you're doing things the right way, whether it's, where the food's coming from, or, what's your use of water and electricity? Are you doing things good? Like we have got a relationship with a local bakery here in St. Louis called Bridge Bread. And it's actually formerly homeless people that are taught the craft of baking. And then they've been selling they started in churches. They just launched a big deal with Wash U through dining services. And they make fantastic products. And then on top of it, it's like a social enterprise that does well. And it helps people. Now they're not home insecure. Now they have cars. Now they can actually make a living and feel good about what they do. So those kind of stories are really important. And those are the things that help drive our business too.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I'll have to try that. That's awesome.
That is awesome. I wanted to mention and just highlight, you guys both actually mentioned this aspect of almost health and wellness that is kind of interlaced in here. And I'm wondering if you all feel that, the pendulum is swinging in some way, because for the longest time, I know my family was huge on like no carb, low carb. So bread and beer was just like the enemy, right? Like, and it feels like the pendulum may be swinging in a way that is, for both of your companies, we're seeing like, well, if you're talking about fresh baked bread with, minimal ingredients that, not packed full of preservatives and things of that nature. If you're talking about a beer that's non-alcoholic, crafted in St. Louis with ingredients like electrolytes and things like that, like, is that really that bad? Is the pendulum kind of swinging in a way that really kind of benefits, or just like people are starting to think about these, formerly, let's call them like, just these almost like scapegoats of the diet industry of like, carbs are the enemy, bread and beer, all of that. Is the pendulum swinging again? I don't know. I'm just curious. Let me tell you, in my household, it never left, that pendulum was always towards bread and beer, but it just feels like it's really starting to, people's minds are starting to change on that end.
I'll tell you from our side, go into a grocery store. Anytime there's a winter storm in St. Louis, or when the pandemic hit and people's fears kind of spiked, what are they going for? They're obviously going to go for bread. They're going to grab eggs. We're making some serious omelets, right? And they're going to grab bread and bread, milk, and eggs. They're just kind of those staples. How many times did people go to the stores and there were, what are the things they're missing on the shelves? Paper towels, toilet paper, cleaning supplies, bread, yeast. There's plenty of beer, I think, for the most part. And I've done my share to try to help, get those depletions out there for you guys. But it's an interesting dynamic, and I think the world's a little bit different than it was a year later. Is the new normal going to be the same as the old normal? No, absolutely not. But I can tell you that the trends that we see in baking are a little bit evolutionary. It's maybe it's number 5 or 6 on the list one year, maybe it pops up to number 3. So the ones that we see, and it's helped create some new products for us, more protein, right? You've seen it with the Power Bar Nation that's been out there for a long time. And I mean, general, like, energy bars. And then on top of it, more fiber, right? Gives you that full factor, that sort of thing. It's good for health. So we created it. We've got plenty of things outside of yeast. We've got 500 different products, right? We make dough conditioners, whether you want the old traditional way or you want something that's clean label, non-GMO, we can do it. If you want a bread softener, if you want a chemical leavener like baking soda, We make a lot of products for a lot of pieces, whether it's a fresh product or a frozen product, which, by the way, frozen really took a big uptick. A lot of people buying frozen pizzas, frozen meals, as long as they feel good about the ingredients inside of it. But yeah, this new world's different, and it helped us launch a new. We have a Bergen bread mix line, and again, it's for B2Bs, but we have a complete protein, so it's double the protein, it's double the fiber. You've got all the great stats. There's no added sugar. There's nothing artificial. And those are the things that people are clamoring for. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but trying to give you a little background.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's funny. I think carbs in beer are different, but like when you take the alcohol out of beer, already we're half the calories. So we already get going for us before we, do anything with it. But just to sort of think of the ingredients that we're looking at, and all the things that you can put back in beer to make it healthier, a huge trend. I do think people will pay a premium for these beverages. We're looking at brewing a immunity stout is kind of the working thing for this fall. So it'll be something you can drink to build your immunity, which I think is a really fascinating idea. But it's got echinacea, elderberry, ginger root, zinc. I think all naturals really huge. I think the fact that we don't have sugar. It's funny, we can market ourselves against Gatorade, which has artificial flavors and a lot of sugar, and we have this product that has more electrolytes than Gatorade and no alcohol, and beer is such a great base because it's all natural to begin with. It's kind of an isotonic drink just naturally versus a energy drink. So anyway, I do think that's a trend, and I do think trying sustainability, all natural, everybody understands this, but you got to deliver on it, and you got to make sure that that's what you're doing. Sure,
that makes sense. It does. I also I wanted to go back to something that I just kind of thought about, because you also both mentioned a little bit in different ways something related to the supply chain, but I'm curious about how that went. And so Jeff, you mentioned that you're doing that at-home delivery in e-commerce. That's really, really fascinating, because I actually hadn't considered delivery of beer, but of course it's non-alcoholic. Sure. So that's really fascinating. So I'm curious if there were any either delays in the supply chain or anything related to delivery times. Similarly, of course, my grocery store did run out of yeast, but very briefly, they got it back. They got it back on shelves, but it did run out of yeast for a minute there. My mother-in-law actually shipped me some yeast from Florida because her grocery store had some. And so, of course, those things are going to, ebb and flow. And of course, the last year saw some swings that I don't think anyone was fully prepared for. But I'm curious about just any of the supply chain over the last year. How's that gone for each of you?
That's interesting. Well, and it's funny. Yeast I remember my wife couldn't find baking yeast one day, and it was a panic. There was a panic, Rick. What are you going to say, man? People kind of freaked out. I would say this: commodities, and who knows what's going to happen, but I think everyone's predicting, and we've already seen it, prices rise of just basic commodities. So cans for us have been more expensive for every brewer. I'm sure, I don't know if you've read the story, but aluminum cans have been a thing. Labels are, everything's going up. We'll see what happens with raw ingredients. I think, everyone's predicting there's going to be this little inflationary bump as the economy opens up a little bit, and there's just a lot more demand for things. So will that affect pricing? Probably. I could see that affecting pricing. Supply wise, I thought, the only problem we had delivery wise was, USPS and UPS were just slammed. And I'm sure that happened to everybody. It seems like they're kind of getting back, and we've had much better luck this year getting product to people. But yes, I would say supply chain wise, it's as a business, it's something that's mostly over my head, commodities, but we deal with it every day. And so, trying to find cans, where you're going to get your next set of cans, where are you going to get, that's been a big deal this year. And we've locked into them, for the next year. But I do think, now that I heard yesterday that everyone's back ordering kegs, I bet that'll help balance out the can thing. So we'll see how that goes.
And I'm gonna just jump on the supply piece is really interesting, because shipping and transportation is always part of this equation. And a couple of years ago, remember, people were clamoring for truck drivers, right? We're going to pay X amount because there's not enough truck drivers. They're aging out, they're retiring. There's not a new, younger supply of guys and gals who want to drive trucks, right? There aren't enough people want to do it. So we went from this position where maybe 2 or 3 businesses were trying to get the same truck to make a delivery to all of a sudden 15 or 16 businesses. And it was up for grabs. So, these things are kind of cyclical, crops and weather. And, we had the polar vortex. It affects things. It affects timing. I just gassed up today for the first time in a while, and the gas pump is now $2.76 a gallon. I was like, I thought we were closer to $2.20, but 2.20, $2.21, whatever it takes. That's just a mom joke, but maybe somebody will know that one out there. But there are a lot of factors besides just what happens in our plants and the things that we want, with trends and such.
That makes sense. Before we go on to, I'm going to move kind of forward into what you guys maybe think where you guys think your industry is headed. And you've already touched on it a little bit. I'm curious if there's anything St. Louis specific that you think has happened this year. And I know that, Rick, your business is, as you mentioned, multinational, global. And so, it can be more even just from, I'm actually in 4240 right now, even just on like the downstairs at this site level of like anything you've noticed in St. Louis. And of course, Jeff, your business is in St. Louis. So is there anything specific to St. Louis that any trends that you've seen that way?
I have seen, well, I think with the recreational marijuana, it's not rec yet, but it's medicinal. So I think in the beverage space, I think there's a lot of activity for people making beverages to figure out how they're going to put CBD, THC, dip their toe into this world. But it's coming so fast, and I don't know if you've seen, but yeah, I think there's dispensaries, and it's happening. And so I would just say, as a trend in this city, because of in the south side, just wherever all these things are popping up, I think from a beverage standpoint, or just I think everyone's kind of trying to figure that out. The brewers are trying to figure it out. The distillers are trying to figure it out. Everyone's just trying to figure that out. So that's one I've seen.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on a little bit with that too, because outside of AB Mauri, we have another division, and I've got a part global role with it called AB Biotech. So we make yeast that goes into beer, wine, and spirits, that goes into biofuels, so stuff that goes into your gas tank, goes into human nutrition like supplementation, to animal feed, livestock feed, pet food, things like that. So we've got this whole other part of our business still underneath Associated British Foods, but putting my beer hat on a little bit to help Jeff is, man, those lower alcohol, no alcohol, the seltzer market has gone just crazy, right? People are looking for new ways. And again, what's the benefit of seltzer? Well, it looks like I'm drinking seltzer, but I'm actually drinking water here. But it's clear. It's got maybe some of the same benefits of being social. But the calorie count, the feel good, the flavors, things like that. So flavors and all that they're just going to continue to boost. People are always like, okay, that was great last week, but what do you got for me now? What's on tap this week? So I think that spice of life, that variety is always going to drive it, whether it's in baking or not. Go look at the types of breads or the types of cakes, or, we've all seen the cronut and how that evolution was several years ago, right? Then it was the brookie, it was the brownie cookie, and how do you compile and do some things differently? But as much as we've talked about health and that better for you, taste is still a massive driver, and it always will be. And the first week on the job, I was talking one of our senior VPs, and he goes, at the end of the day, you got to make sure, these bakers who are making cakes and donuts, it has to taste good. Like on some level, you have that healthier, better for you bread, but on the indulgence side, it's tough to make a really light donut. If I'm going to indulge, I want to go all the way and make sure that it tastes good, because if they have a bad experience, they're not going to take a second bite of the apple, if you know what I mean.
Yep. That makes sense. You just reminded me as well, maybe an unintended benefit of all of the Netflix watching this year was a lot of British Bake Off. So you might have even gotten a boost from that as well. A lot of people watching, trying their hand at different cakes and everything. I'm not sure.
Totally.
Yeah. That's actually a really decent segue, because both of you mentioned some things that I think I want to touch on for the future of the industry. And And Jeff, you mentioned a big one here in STL. I think the state in general is probably preparing for recreational marijuana here in a matter of time. And so, I'm curious about, what innovations do you think might happen in your given industries, like respective industries, or what other trends do you think you'll see? The one with baking, you did mention a couple of things that, I think back to like the first time I heard about a cronut, and then how excited people got about cronuts for a long time. And then quite honestly about how like, I don't really hear about cronuts anymore, or not as much, right? And so there is always the notion of like, well, what's the next thing? Well, what's the next thing? Jeff, you mentioned already the just the new styles of beer that you're going to be brewing. I'm sure that you have your staples, your flagship, let's say, beers, but like there is going to need to be that next one. So yeah, let's open that up into like, what else do you guys see coming in the future for your industry, specifically your company, or not, or yeah.
Yeah, it's funny for me, I think, and I'll just touch on this again. And I think we mentioned it, but we make these CBD waters, right? And it's interesting. This is an interesting story. I don't know if everyone's familiar with CBD. It's part of the cannabinoid plant, but it's not the THC part that makes you high, but it has a lot of health benefits for it. The cannabinoid plant itself has CBG and all these other cannabinoids, and each one of them is going to be explored and looked at on the health benefits for people. And so I think that entire industry, as it's delivered to you, and beverages are such a great place to put these products into. I think that is going to be a huge trend in the future in the health and wellness space, because it's not the thing that makes you high. It's a lot of the benefits for all kinds of things that they're discovering with this plant. And I would then take that to the next level of all kinds of plant ingredients. And St. Louis is such a, with Monsanto and the whole bioscience field here, it has this huge backbone of discovering these different things in plants. And so we kind of keep for us, I've got lots of people that, I'm in touch with, just like, hey, what's the latest trends? Because these are all ingredients we're interested. These are really healthy things. There's when you think of CBD as a thing that can help people get through cancer treatment, beer is one of the things that if you're going through chemotherapy, you can still taste, because chemotherapy affects your taste, but beer actually tastes really good for people going through that. If they discover something in the cannabinoid plant that really helps the going through chemotherapy, we can make a beer with a very specific ingredient in it for that kind of thing. And when you start to think about what that means and the medicines you can put in beer that could be really beneficial, it's so exciting. And I think St. Louis is the place, because of the bioscience here and the plant science here, that we can figure that out. So anyway, I think that's a cool, interesting trend for our city.
It is actually, just real quick, Rick, before you go in. I think it's fascinating, Jeff, that you mentioned again and again the bioscience side of things, the ag tech side of things, that part of St. Louis, and not actually the craft beer side of things. It's fascinating because, like, most people, I would say, oh, it's a craft brewery, but it's non-alcoholic. It's got to be this lineage of like the craft brewery in St. Louis. And to your point, it's actually like, well, when you think about, the well-being portion, right? Well-being brewing, right? There's two sides of that. Well-being, half of your name. It's really fascinating to hear that aspect of it.
Yep. And I agree. And I think it's taken a while to, I've seen that from the beginning, but it takes, it just takes a little while to get there. But the bioscience part of it is right there. It's just, you almost feel like you're on this verge of plant science becoming amazing, delivering health benefits in foods and beverages. So anyway.
Yeah, I'd say I'm going to tag on to a couple pieces there. One is portion control. I think is an important one in the baking side, especially COVID, right? It's adjusted the way we pick up, fresh baked goods, or who's ever been to a Quick Trip and maybe you're like, hey, I'm going to take one of those donuts or one of the taquitos or whatever it is, right? And now we've all discovered ways to like open doors with our elbows. It's like we're in the NCAA tournament. We're in the paint, like moving to try to open doors without using our hands. And And that part of the business, frankly, it went away, right? It went away for a long time. Food service and those sorts of things. Now you've got pre-wrapped packages, and some of that's going to continue on until people feel comfortable. And what did I hear today? 84 million people, adults, have been vaccinated. So that's about 1 in 3 adults in the U.S. I just got my second shot about 4 hours ago. So I'm in a little sore, but I'm here. And just so you know, we drove to Kirksville, Missouri, which is about a 3-hour drive.
Oh my gosh.
But so we hightailed it back. But so I think that portion control is going to be out there. There are some breads, and I think this is an interesting one. And I'm shocked as, again, we're not bakers, right? We are a baking ingredient and baking technology company, but I'm shocked that more of companies, there's one bakery here in the Midwest called Lewis, and they sell half loaves of bread. I think that's a really interesting thing when you start looking at maybe single person households, or maybe an older couple that doesn't eat as much bread. Not everybody drinks a gallon of milk or has 2 gallons of milk. We have a 13-year-old or almost 13-year-old son here, and he does his own gallon of milk a week. And but some people don't eat a full loaf of bread, and they don't want to throw it away. So it gets back to that sustainability piece. So how do you handle that appropriately? Half loaves, smaller portions. You've seen it with some of the sweet goods, the 100-calorie packs and things like that. So I think some of that stuff's here to stay, and individual serving size, I think could, it's certainly going to be here.
That's cool. I don't know why they give me hamburger buns for 8. I only need 4. That's one. Like, I always have 4 extra hamburger buns. Like, what the hell? Can we just have a 4-pack?
I think there was a good, what was it? Father of the Bride was Steve Martin, where he went down the aisle and he's like, I only have 6 hot dogs. I don't want all 8 buns, and he kind of ripped them out, and I'm only paying for 6. I think there's something like, sorry, a little movie trivia, but
there you go. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And yeah, I think it is fascinating what you mentioned about the portion control, and just the it has become so individualized because we as a society said, I want as few people touching my food as possible for the foreseeable, for like right now, right? Like in this immediate time. And so it's really fascinating to think of how that will change. Jeff, I'm curious, I believe I've actually seen the electrolyte beer that you mentioned is in a larger can. Is that correct? Versus the other ones? And so is there any reasoning why, because it's like some breweries, there's 16-ounce cans, there's 12-ounce cans. Sometimes it's either or both. And so I'm curious if there was a specific reason that happened for you, speaking of portion size.
Yeah, that's interesting. We did those pint cans for that Victory Wheat, which has the electrolytes in it, because we lower the carbonation. It's a sports recovery drink, so it has a lot. So anyway, we put it in a little bigger cans, because the idea is when you get done with the race, you wanted that amount of it. And then we did another beer in a bigger can, and now we're the only non-alcoholic craft brewer that has this 16-ounce, so it really stands out on shelves. So now it's just, the designers love it because they have a lot of more space to work with, and so anyway, so we'll probably continue with the 16s for a while, because they're a nice size. It's a full pint, so it's it looks good in your pint glass.
Well, I would tell you, I was on the Michelob Ultra brand at one point, and they do a lot behind golf. They do a lot behind running. So we sponsor a lot of 5Ks and, of course, marathons, half marathons. And at the end of a race, it was always nice to socialize and have a beer, right? To have a fresh Michelob Ultra right there ready to go. Now you've got something that's NA. So now you're like, okay, I can have a couple of these and not feel bad about getting in the car, because I'm probably a little dehydrated to start with. But so I think it's interesting, especially with you adding the electrolytes and looking at some of those other inclusions, if you will. That's good.
Without a doubt. And I think Michelob Ultra is one of those brands that it is an awesome brand. And, if you've ever worked on it, it just knows it knows who it is in the beer business, right? And it has this really specific place. So we ripped that off and tried to make a different version of it for sure. The craft version. Yeah.
There you go. You got to stand on some shoulders here and there.
Nothing
wrong
with
that. Yeah. So we had a question come in that is related to the diet question, maybe that I asked earlier, but it's specific to one that is definitely having a moment more recently, and that is the keto diet. So regarding diet trends and low carb beers, is there a keto play for Wellbeing? Is AB seeing a trend large enough in keto to dip into it? very specific questions for each of you. So didn't know, I wanted to ask that. That was just mentioned in the chat here.
Yeah, on the baking side, keto, some of these things are still they're bubbling up, and there's always a different diet that tends to kind of come in and out every few years. But that's a big reason we came out with this Bergen complete protein mix, because it gives you all the stats that you want. It gives you the protein, the fiber, no added sugar. So it's got really good numbers across the board. And technically there's some keto friendly aspects to it as well. So, we try to meet that, but again, we're, as I mentioned, a lot of our products are really proprietary or custom made for that specific baker. So we do work with some bakeries that have that as one of their goals. And then there's plenty that are just like, no, we're making large amounts of whole wheat bread or bagels or baguettes or whatever. So, that kind of gets into our DNA too, is at the end of the day, we want our customers to be successful with whatever they want to make. And then if we feel like, hey, if they're successful, then we're going to be successful. And it kind of goes back to our identity is built around this passion for baking. And it's really shared from the team that's in there baking, and they've been baking all throughout the pandemic. We've been deemed as one of those essential food companies because we help, get the bread on the shelves by having the ingredients that go to the bakers. So there's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts to this. But when it comes back to these diets, there are multiples, and we're very customer specific.
That makes sense, especially with your customers being other businesses. You specifically mentioned B2B. It's not that every bakery in the world right now is saying like, we're gonna jump on this, we're gonna follow that, right? So like, it's like, because they're a bakery, so at the end of the day, they're gonna keep doing what they do probably. But at the same time, it's very interesting to hear that you're like, well, but we understand that trends do change, or even that specific, like, making something with a complete protein just allows somebody to have a different offering, right? So I imagine that you have businesses that are saying like, we do need more of that, right?
Right, and labels are changing all the time. There's going to be more clarity next year behind things that are bioengineered. But honestly, if a baker wants something that's non-GMO, or if they want something that's organic, we can do it. We can do it. If there are other alternatives besides gluten, we can do it too. So it's kind of a nice position to be in. At the end of the day, we're working for the bakery. We want them to do well.
And Jeff, any keto play for Wellbeing?
And keto is lower carbs, higher protein. Is that what it is?
I believe high fat as well.
Oh, high fat. Wow. I have seen, I think our beers are pretty friendly for low carbs anyway, just because, I don't think beer is a huge carb driver. And when you take the alcohol out, the calories, a lot of the stuff comes out with it. But I have seen this beer in Germany. They did add protein to a beer, and I'm not sure what it was, but it wasn't, it was pretty recently, but I am interested in that. I do think if you can figure out how to add protein into a beer, just whatever, I think there's something there for sure. So I'm open for all those kinds of things. It's just trying to figure out how to do it.
I think it's one of the few markets where protein hasn't hit yet, because it's in any kind of snack food that you're looking at, whether it's bars or yogurt or any kind of dairy. It's it's in a lot of those products, but that's good to look at that.
Perhaps go ahead.
No, I don't know what I read about how they did it, and I was curious. And anyway, but I'm super curious of trying to figure that out for sure.
Yeah, because you could go from the the post kickball, post 5K electrolyte Wellbeing to the like post workout drink of like protein. So that's pretty fascinating on both fronts. And it's interesting to hear that with both industries and with both companies, you're of course and this is something that came up at the last time I spoke at Global Trends Local Faces. The consumer is the ultimate data point, right? Like what they're buying and purchasing is the data point. And so, it's really fascinating that, there can be trends, there can be swings, but it's going to come down to, that supply of like what the consumer wants to purchase. So really, really fascinating. Before we kind of open it up to any other questions that might come in, or just general kind of opening it up. I was going to see if either of you had anything else you wanted to discuss, just generally about either your industry or something we didn't get to in this discussion. You guys both had such really interesting points on kind of the range of topics that I wanted to discuss. So thank you both. You covered a lot of ground. So if the answer is no, that's quite all right. And if that's the case, then I think we'll just kind of go into perhaps the final part of this session, which is just, what ask would you make of the Venture Cafe community? Jeff, you mentioned that you've already made a few, over the years, right? You've been in this community. Obviously, Rick, you're downstairs, so this is obviously still taking place virtually, but I'm sure you remember the Thursday night gatherings upstairs. So anyway, what ask would you make of the Venture Cafe community? This could be anything that you guys can think of.
I try to sneak in the office maybe once a week, right? We've done some different promotional kits for some bakeries here in the last couple months. So it's nice to get in there, but for the most part, it's really our baking team. It's our team that's in the fermentation lab doing a lot of science work. But for the most part, our entire business has been working remotely. And honestly, it's worked well. This is all at the same time when we have a new president, right? Mark Prendergast left. He went back to Australia. He's still with our company globally. Brent Fenton came in as our new president, doing a wonderful job. It's just, I don't think he's met the entire staff without a mask on. And I mean, what a crazy time that's been to come in and lead a company. So, I would say when things start opening up, say hello, go visit one of the businesses, right? We've missed seeing some of the people around here. Like we'd go to Park Avenue Coffee at the front of the building and grab a cup of coffee and maybe a muffin or something. And now, what happened to some of these people that we had relationships with, or the Chocolate Pig? Now you've got a Loft Hotel and Wasabi's new on board there, and that's exciting. But the construction has stopped. So, I would say continue to support those people that are here. There are plenty of people here. Square moved downtown. Great for them. Great for their business. It's evolutionary. Wash U is still a big presence. So, I gotta tap back a little bit to Ted Lasso, right? Hopefully everybody's watched it. If you haven't like binge watched a show, watch that show, because there are a lot of positive messages at a time when I think we all need it. And one of the messages that comes out of Jason Sudeikis is be curious, right? There's a lot of things going on. And if you want to be in the know, ask some questions, or just, be interested. You'll find out something new, and guess what? You might have a new friend for life, and you might find something new that's going to fill your passion and something that's going to make you feel whole in this whole thing. So just stay connected, and it's tough, but I guess what? When this thing comes booming back, and I think it will be booming back, you're going to want to be a part of it.
I absolutely love that sentiment. Sorry, just to jump in real quick. I think that's just an open invite for me to come bake some bread in that experimentation lab, is what it sounds like. I'm not entirely sure, but
I mean, we're not open to do all that yet. But when we get the green light, buddy, yeah, absolutely.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to that, and I really do appreciate that sentiment. That's really nice. Jeff, what about you?
That's funny. I love Ted Lasso. It's like the most subversive character on TV, because you have all these Breaking Bad anti-heroes after anti-heroes, and then you have Ted Lasso. You're like, where did this guy come from? He's so awesome. So anyway, great one, Rick. So it's funny. I have some specific asks. Like here's what I need. I need some people that can help me infuse liquids with awesome ingredients. So we're looking for that whole thing. And I think there's a lot of science in that. And I'd love to know where to start. And then I need a really hot e-commerce agency that can make content and run the analytics side at the same time. And that's hard to find, an agency that can do both. But that's what we need. I know they exist, but we're starting to look at them. But if there's anyone in St. Louis specifically, I've not been in the agency scene for such a long time, and all the agencies I know are all the old, just people that I've known. It's been a long time, so I know there's a whole world of new marketing firms out there. So if anyone has a good one, those are my two asks.
That's awesome. We actually already have a suggestion in the chat. So perhaps.
There you go.
Thanks
Yeah.
to Haley. Yeah. Paradigm New Media Group.
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah.
And even Carl came in with a good idea, right? You can freeze bread. Here's a quick little story on the scaling of bread, right? If you don't have like a little, a bread pantry or a bread box, should you put it A, in the refrigerator, or B, in the freezer?
Ooh.
You don't want to put it.
I always do the fridge, man. I always have.
Yeah, but guess
Yeah, it's
what?
bad.
Your bread is going to stale quicker in the refrigerator than it will in the freezer. So I know you think, oh, it's going to stop maybe the mold and stuff like that,
Yep.
but it helps stale. So there's two things going on. One is the softness and the freshness quality, and then the other is that kind of that mold, preservation aspect. So there's two different things going on. So good point by Carl to say, hey, put it in the freezer, use half, bring the other back out. A lot of times you can put it in the oven for a couple minutes at 350, and that'll help kind of spring it to life a little bit. But yeah, good pointers by Haley and Carl.
Nice.
I love that. Yeah, and I was just gonna say I was watching the chef show on Netflix. Speaking of shows, this has just become a streaming channel now. We're just gonna change the conversation completely. But I was watching the chef show, and they effectively said that until it does mold, which will of course eventually happen, you can always resuscitate bread, or basically you should never throw away bread because you could always turn it into breadcrumbs, throw it in the oven. There's so much, and so I always found that fascinating because you'll buy an entire loaf of bread. And then, inevitably, you meet that midweek where you either have to start dipping it into soup to bring it back to life, or you need to turn into breadcrumbs. So yeah, I'm gonna definitely take the. I learned something new today. Freeze your bread.
I know, me too.
Yeah, that's awesome. And
hey, Joe, I do have another ask. Just thinking about it, because there's some creative minds on this call, and every 3 years in the baking business, it's not like the technology industry or the sporting goods. It always has a big annual trade show. Our show is every 3 years in Las Vegas. It's called IBIE. It's the kind of the largest international baking industry exposition. And in 2016, came on board. We actually did the science of baking, and we did a virtual reality experience. So we took people down to a pinhead of yeast, right? And you could take a pinhead of yeast just on the top of this pen, and in 5 days you could have a truckload of yeast, right? It's just how fast that stuff goes. Wow. It's really cool science. So we took them through the ovens, like at a virtual space, and then all the way to the space station. And it was a great experience. It got people thinking outside of their comfort zones in terms of baking. Now in 2019, we flipped the tables and we did the art of baking, and we brought in Duff Goldman. If you've seen Food Network, Buddy versus Duff. Duff's kind of the fun guy, Ace of Cakes. And we said, Duff, we don't want you to bake a thing. And he's like, what? And we said, you're an artist. We see your cakes, the beauty of it. So we actually created an art gallery. And he did a lot of wonderful things, which now are kind of curated. They're inside of our building. So if you walk by our building, you'll see this massive Fleishman's yeast packet. And it's made out of fondant, and it's made out of wood and color and the whole thing. So it looks like a yeast packet. But if you go up and smell it, it smells like sugar because it's still got, So we actually did two purposes. One's we built this great event for an exhibition, and then we also have great artwork for our space. So when things open up, love to show you. So we did the science of baking, art of baking, and now in 2022, we're already starting to think towards September next year. What are we going to do? If
What's your theme?
We don't have a theme yet.
That's what you need.
I know. I need a theme. If
Okay.
anybody's got a great idea, it's worth some lunch and some Fleischmann's yeast to you. So
nice.
and maybe some Wellbeing beer.
I'll throw that in.
Jeff and I will take you to lunch. And
That's
Joe,
perfect.
you got to come too. You're part of it.
Okay, that sounds good. We already have a suggestion there. We've got bread crypto. Obviously,
Bread crypto
is
bit bread or something like that. Bit bread.
Blockchain.
Like
there's got to be like bread chain. There's got to be something.
Yeah.
There's got to be something in there.
Tyler, leave it to Tyler.
Yeah, of course, of course. But no, this is perfect. I'm actually really I'm really glad that you guys had some specific asks. As Tyler mentioned, we'll certainly circulate these. In fact, we've already gotten some suggestions in the chat, and so as a way of a wrap up, if anyone else wants to chat or anything else, that's great. But I just wanted to sincerely thank you both. I'm really grateful that you both agreed to do this. It's the type of discussion that is always going to be fruitful because there's two people who are you could say experts in this industry. In this case, the fact that you two knew each other from before, and there was this, like I said, this Venn diagram of overlap, especially between you two. I think it made for a great discussion, and like I said, I'm really grateful that you were both here. So thank you.
Cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it was an easy one. When I saw Jeff's name thrown in, I was like, he's one of my favorite people. From the creative side, we always just had a good relationship, and I was like, wow, it's serendipitous, right? It works well for both of us. So
I feel the same way on the client side. I was like, Oleshak, my guy, that's awesome. We had a lot of fun together. We made a lot of good creative stuff, and that's really always fun. That's
what it is. So yeah, wish everybody well. Thanks for the comments here, Beth. And Carl's looking for NASCAR tickets, so I got to take that offline.
I'm glad the first thing you did was clarify that you weren't a driver, because it was about to be my very first question.
Yeah, I don't know if I could get in the car, but
awesome. Well, thank you guys again. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of the viewers. And yeah, we'll go ahead and wrap it up and end it there. And yeah, thanks again. I'll follow up shortly. But yeah,
all best.